Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads. I hope you're doing well. Today I have my review of Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey. Before we get started, I figured I would kind of keep with what I've been doing as I've ventured off into new authors for June on the Range. I have done some research about these differing authors. I figured I would share some fun facts about Zane Grey, otherwise known officially as Pearl Zane Grey. He wrote 89 written works and short stories, of which 112 films have been adapted off his written works. And of the 112, half of those were adapted in the 1930s. He sold over 30 million copies worldwide. Grey played baseball and studied dentistry at the University of Pennsylvania. There actually is a sequel to Riders of the Purple Sage. It is titled The Rainbow Trail, and it discusses the young character in Riders of the Purple Sage, the adopted daughter of Lassiter and Jane, their daughter Faye Larkin. And so it centers around that and takes place 10 years after the events of Riders of the Purple Sage. Grey spent months and months away from his family and children while he was writing, and he spent time fishing and was reportedly quite the ladies' man. The Altadena Zane Grey estate was lost in 2025 to the Altadena fires in California. Grey supposedly wrote all of his written works and books freehand with little to no punctuation. So I thought those were interesting and cool facts. I hope you appreciate that. And without further ado, let's dive right in and talk about Riders of the Purple Sage. So Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey, published in 1915, a Western. It is one of two books in this series. It has its own sequel called The Rainbow Trail. And so let's dive right in and talk about the summary of this book. So it tells the story of Jane Witherstein, a Mormon woman in Utah in the late 1800s, and she adopts her father's ranch after his passing and is pretty well off. And the Mormons there in Utah have plans to kind of abscond her ranch, and they want her to marry an elder in the church by the name of Tull, and the Bishop Dyer approves of this, and Jane is very headstrong and doesn't want anything to do with it. Well, she wants to maintain really her independence. Lo and behold, in comes Lassiter, otherwise known as Jim Lassiter, that you learn later in the story. He is a gunslinger. He intervenes in this, and he comes in with this mystique that is really interesting. He wants to expose this religious sect's kind of hypocrisy. The story unfolds as different elements of cattle rustling, kidnapping, and gunfighting escalates to the point where it pushes Jane kind of off her property. But there's also some interweaving personal relationship stories that also take place that grabs the reader's attention. You're trying to figure out what's going to happen with different characters, whether it's Bess and Byrne, whether it's Lassiter and Jane, whether it's Tull and his posse, and there's also some outlaws as well. And so you're trying to figure out, between navigating different personal conflicts and relationships and revelations, what is going to happen and who is who. And so that's kind of the summary of the story. Let's talk a little bit about what I enjoyed. Grey's writing is poetic. It is very poetic. It is a huge contrast to what I've been reading when it comes to Louis L'Amour. Very descriptive as all get out. Beautiful settings when it comes to like Deception Pass, her range, the landscapes, just simple things like the creeks and meandering rainfall, and then the thunderstorms, obviously the purple sage that they talk about. It's very interesting. The story is heavily focused on Jane's cattle and her racing horses that she breeds. There's a lot of talk about the horses. You can really tell that Grey, as an author, really likes to write about the setting. He likes to write about introspective thoughts, and you get that as you jump from point of view to point of view, whether it's Jane, whether it's Lassiter, whether it's Burns, whether it's Bess. And so I thought that was really interesting. Tull is a really bad man. He's a hypocrite. There's a lot of discussion around the Mormon religion, and just in a light touch, but it's ever present throughout the story. Jane, as a very young woman, is very naive, and it puts her in some awkward positions, being very naive and very young, and it definitely comes through in the story. It adds some layers to it. There's quite a lot of stubbornness when it comes to Mormonism and what takes place and how the men view women in this era and time and in their religion, and it definitely rings true in the story. Again, the horses are a real integral part of the story. I did enjoy that. It really picks up around chapter 14 and 15. You actually finally get some real action. There's a great horse chase. There's a shootout while riding. It's kind of short-lived for my taste, but I really enjoyed it. There's definitely some brief standoffs and some discussions man to man that were very uncomfortable and awkward that you look for in a Western. The conflict was sort of anticlimactic, but more of a finalization of personal relationships. I really enjoyed the stuff about Deception Pass with Bess and Byrne. I really liked them quite a bit in their relationship. So let's dive right in and talk about some criticisms, because I did have some. Lassiter, let's start with him. He comes into the story and I'm like, okay, great. We got this mysterious gunslinger. He's not going to take any crap from anyone. He comes into the story, very ominous, ever present, kind of in your face. He's not going to back down. He's going to push it back to those hard busting Mormons that think they can push one over on Jane. And it doesn't get hardcore. It just doesn't have that hardcore essence in the story. He kind of more guidance, more relationshipy. I didn't really like that kind of trope in this story. And then my second kind of criticism is the pace. The pace is slower. It's much slower than I cared for. Again, Gray does a great job as a writer. Very poetic writing, very descriptive, you really melt into the scenery. I really like Deception Pass that he describes. The thunderstorms were even interesting, how he describes them. But it's a slower burn. I also thought, kind of go hand in hand with pace, that I thought his chapters seemed too long. And I say that as a criticism, as well as it's kind of weird in a way, because they weren't overly long compared to other books I've read in terms of length per se, but they just felt like you were there too long. I don't know if I've just got accustomed to shorter, choppier chapters and, 8 or 10, 15 page chapters, but it felt like I was in these chapters for 20, 30, 40 pages. And it just felt like you needed some kind of break. And so those are my criticisms. In terms of rating and overall impression, I give it a 4.0. It's good. It's not great. I can understand why it's a classic. A lot of people love it. But I can also see why there's some people. I know Lou G was one of them, one of my subscribers. He's like, hey, I think that's not for me. I kind of walked away from it. And I can understand why. It's definitely a slower burn. There has moments where you think you're getting to the point where it's like, I don't know if this is for me. And then it kind of goes in one direction and kind of grabs your attention a little more. But it's just enough to kind of, at least for me, it was just enough to drag me on. It's a good classic Western. It's a great story. It's a good story. It's not great, in my opinion. So in terms of, if you like a softer Western, a more kind of personal relationship, introspective look at personalities back in the West in the harder times, how they deal with those relationships, more intricate settings, very descriptive prose, this is definitely your jam. If you want more action, if you want more standoffs, more quick pace, more gunslinging, more about the bad guy and what they're up to versus, more introspective look on how we're going to build a life together and that kind of thing, this is probably not the best Western to read. And it's a classic as well. So I say that with some caution. So, but in the end, that is my review. Riders of the Purple Sage, my first Zane Grey book. It won't be my last, I can tell you that. I did like his writing that much. It's good, but it's not great. And that's my review. I hope you enjoy the honesty, and I hope you're having a great June on the range. And I will talk to you all in the next one. Thanks.